The theme of our conference is the right side of history. Now, Martin Luther King said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it tends to justice. So I think really that's the perspective we're looking at, that we're on the side of justice, because history can go up and down in terms of justice, and we are facing particularly great challenges just now, and really history does depend on how we respond to the challenges of our age. So I'm really going to say something about that. I thought I would add an intriguing title to make people sit up and start thinking, what's he talking? So some of the staff are doing, what's he talking about? Pharaohs and heroes, and how can he possibly fit that into a pro-life talk? So anyway, I'm hoping it just won't sound crazy, but as I speak it will unfold and you'll see what I'm getting at, because I want to mention the power of an evil Pharaoh, the role of conscience, and the need for heroic action today in our age. So that really is the arc of what I want to do to fill this arc of the moral universe tending towards justice. Let's hope we can encourage ourselves to do that. Anyway, but I wanted to jump back first before I go on with my talk, and that's to say that a fortnight ago I was in Germany. I was speaking at the March for Life in Cologne, and at SPUC we've got a sort of link with Germany in that, for many of you, you will be involved with SPUC, you will know about our white flower appeals, and in fact there's so much of our outreach and getting the pro-life message out in churches is through the white flower appeal. Well, that was inspired by Sophie Scholl and those who were part of the White Rose movement in Germany during the Second World War. Now, during the Second World War, most of the people went with the flow in Germany. Most of the people went with the flow. But amidst them, there were a small number of people who were willing to stand up and try to urge their fellow citizens to see right from wrong. There was a small number of them. So when I was speaking in Cologne a fortnight ago, I couldn't resist looking up some quotes from Sophie Scholl. There's a really favourite one of mine that she said as they were leading her out to her death. She was actually guillotined. She was just a young girl. And if you've not seen the film or read any of the books about Sophie Scholl, please do. She's a really encouraging witness for the last century. She really stands out. But what she said on her way to her death was, how can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give themselves up individually to a righteous cause? Such a fine sunny day and I have to go, but what does my death matter if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action? Now, I think that's what we have done in the pro-life movement. I think thousands of people have been stirred to a righteous cause. And actually in Cologne a fortnight ago, it was quite incredible. When I arrived, a year ago, they'd had their first March for Life in Cologne, and it was a genuine riot. Antifa are the big group over there who attacked pro-lifers, so they had turned up in force, and the police just were not ready for it, so a genuine riot ensued from these Antifa, anti-fascist, ironically, but they don't like people who have a different opinion from themselves, and they turn up with great unpleasantness and violence and intimidation to silence anyone they don't like. So they turned up last year. So when I arrived in Cologne, I'd spent 2 months trying to learn German, and I got some phrases really, really good, but as soon as I said them, people then started bombarding me with fluent German. I had no idea what they said. But anyway, it was really encouraging when I arrived, because the number of the pro-lifers there was absolutely enormous. Thousands of them, stacks of young people, all bouncing with joy. And as we walked along, the police presence was huge, riot police absolutely everywhere. But what struck me was, every now and again we'd encounter a small cluster of pro-abortion. They really are, whatever has happened to them, they are fanatics. Whatever they're trying to justify in their life, it's hard to understand. The level of hatred and fanaticism from them is scary. But what was amazing was thousands upon thousands of pro-life people, and probably they amounted to 100 people fighting for the cause of death, I would call it. So we have stirred up thousands of people to a good cause, and I want to encourage you of that today. So anyway, back to my talk. Pharaoh. Well, the reason Pharaoh came to my mind was, well, it came to my mind twice in the last few weeks, which made me think, I'm going to tie that into my talk at the conference. Pharaoh, why would he come up? The first one was, I was looking back at SPUC's work, and it was 10 years ago that the Glasgow midwives case came to an end. I don't know if you're aware of it. Some of you will be very well aware of it. If you're not, there were two midwives, Connie Wood and Mary Deighan, and they gradually were put under pressure in their job as midwives to become involved in abortions. And they just thought, no, we just cannot do that. And they endured, it's a difficult, I don't know if you've ever been through a thing like that at work, especially if you're innocent, you've done nothing wrong, you sign up for a job to bring life into the world, not to be participating in the ending of an innocent human life. That's why they took up that job. People full of love for life, but then told that they have to participate in ending life. They just thought, no, we just cannot do that, whatever the consequences are. So they stood up against that. And so it was an arduous process. And that was before the legal case started. So they then had to endure 2 years going through the courts. That's a very stressful situation to have to go through. But I was thinking about that. In the pro-life movement, we all have different levels that we're called to. But I can imagine you, if you take a second to reflect on this, you probably at some stage have been in a position you thought, my values run against everyone else's here. Being pro-life is actually a bit awkward here. And you've had to take some sort of stand, or you've had to think, how do I deal with this? How do I address it? How do I answer this situation just now? And the easy way is to just keep quiet and move on. And for some of us, that might be keep quiet, move on, but then think, how do I work for justice behind the scenes and find a way in? You know, that's a genuine way to do it. But all of us have had to face that. But anyway, Mary and Connie, two very gentle, decent people, had to endure this terrible case internally through the hospital, getting dragged through the courts, and ultimately they lost. We had to get taken to the Supreme Court, so we lost the first level, but SPUC funded that case, and we took it to an appeal, and we won the appeal. But then it went to the Supreme Court, and it was overruled at the Supreme Court, so sadly their conscience, irrespective of what you think a midwife should be doing, they didn't think it should be helping to kill unborn babies, so they lost their job, and the court said that they did not have any protection of their conscience. So why Pharaoh? Well, at the time, when I was working for the Bishops' Estate, I was quite involved with SPUC even at that time, so I knew Mary and Connie then, but I remember chatting to them, and it was Mary in particular who told me that it had been such an ordeal for her to put up with that and to keep going. But I don't know if you hear people say this, they say, oh, just pull the Bible out when you're suffering and open it up and flick it a page and just see what it says. You know, you ever try that? It's amazing actually how often that actually works. But anyway, Mary did that, and she couldn't believe it. She opened it up at Exodus, and she came across this story that, to be honest, I didn't know this had happened either until she told me this. But she opened it up, and she came across a part in Exodus, and it was the story of the time when Pharaoh had decided that all the Israeli or the Jewish boy children had to be killed. He was frightened of the growing Jewish population in Egypt. And so in Exodus it tells us that Pharaoh summoned 2 Hebrew midwives. So Mary thought, 2 Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, and he commanded them to kill all male Hebrew babies as soon as they were born. But then it goes on in Exodus and it says, the midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Now, most of us will be familiar with Moses. You know, Moses survived because of the testimony or the witness of those midwives who would not comply with Pharaoh to kill the babies. And Mary and Connie were not going to kill any babies. So that is what kept it. That was one of the things that gave them motivation. But then I was in the kitchen in the office, and I got chatting. This was the second time Pharaoh came to mind, and it was Emmett. You'll have the pleasure of hearing from Emmett later. You won't forget, if you've not heard Emmett speak, you won't forget when you do. You have the pleasure of hearing him later this afternoon. But he was telling me, oh, John, I was watching The Prince of Egypt with the kids at the weekend. The film The Prince of Egypt. Hopefully you've seen it. It's a fantastic film. But anyway, he watched that, and at the end of it, his wee son said to him, oh, Dad, we are so lucky they don't have pharaohs nowadays to kill babies. And Emmett just realised that Dominic was old enough to maybe start to let him know the reality. So he tried to be as delicate as he could and explain to Dominic, Dominic, we have the equivalent of pharaohs nowadays. There are people there who try, and they do, kill babies. But how proud do you think Dominic was when he heard that his dad's job was to fight against Pharaoh? So that's the sort of heroic response that we give nowadays. Like, he was full of joy to think, my dad is fighting against the Pharaoh of today. Now, why can a 10-year-old child, or how is it that a 10-year-old child knows that killing an innocent human life is wrong? Why is that? And yet adults don't seem to know it. Well, I would suggest that a 10-year-old's conscience is still undulled by the efforts of our society. It seems as if we have a society absolutely determined to darken people's consciences. And the sad reality is that if our society embraces a particular evil and people start to do that evil, everyone's conscience starts to get darkened. It's often struck me that abortion corrupts everything it touches. So it corrupts our hospitals, and then if you go to the law, it corrupts our law, it corrupts everyone involved in it, the families who are affected by it, the women who are damaged by it. Abortion corrupts everything, and if a society tries to pretend it's okay, it darkens everyone's conscience. John Paul II identified it as the great problem of our age, the darkening of conscience, and he said, and this was in 1981, so think how it's changed since 81, the man whose heart is hardened and whose conscience is degenerate, even if he is in full possession of his strength and physical capacities, is sick spiritually, and everything must be done to restore him to health of soul. Now, everyone has a conscience, and that's the thing that is on our side, but we are facing a huge effort to darken people's conscience, and part of our effort is to reawaken them. But our society, we've maybe lost sight of this, how lucky we were to be born in a Christian culture. You know, Europe was the flourishing of Christianity, and a Christian culture recognised the importance of conscience. It permeated our legal system, it permeated our culture. Even if you think of things like Pinocchio, I love the story of Pinocchio, and it's a great thing for a child to see, yes, it's a real pest to have a conscience jumping up your shoulder and telling you what you should be doing, you feel like doing something else. It's really, really annoying. But if you want to fulfill yourself, if you want to become a real boy, as we learn in Pinocchio, you follow your conscience. But our literature was full of that. You know, think of Shakespeare's Macbeth, you know, about the role of conscience, or Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. Our literature was saturated with that. A Man for All Seasons, films that won Oscars because they dwelt on the importance of conscience. And I remember in 2000 being at the Vatican when politicians from around the world, I think it was 10,000 politicians, came to hear the Pope talk about Thomas More as an example for politicians, a man of conscience. However, we're losing that. Our society is darkening, and we're losing this idea of the importance of conscience. It happens in every age. Every age has its moral challenges, but all of you in this room somehow have recognised the moral challenge of our age is the killing of the innocent. And even if everyone is keeping quiet about it or just doesn't want to talk about it, polite society, we just cannot remain silent. We just cannot allow it to happen. We need to do something to awaken the consciences of the people around us. But the reality is that we are facing an industry that's skilled and absolutely committed to darkening consciences. Now, and I think for us, similar to like Sophie Scholl, she worked to try and awaken the consciences of those in her era, and we have to do the same today. But our situation hasn't arisen by accident. It's a small number of people who are leading this change. So very often, if you just watch the news, if you listen to the BBC, or just listen to politicians' views, you'll think, oh, everybody's on the same, everyone's against us, we're dinosaurs, there's something wrong with us. You are the majority, but it's a small number of people who've enforced their ideology on the rest of us. It's a small number of extremists, and they have a new moral vision. They have a new moral vision that they want to change. Now, I studied human rights law at the time when, at that time, freedom of speech was everything. There was a famous judgment at the time, Handyside v UK, and in that decision it said, you can say anything you want, you can disturb people, you can upset them, you can scare them from your views, you can say anything. But that era is over. That era has gone. We now live in a, you cannot touch any of the new doctrine, of the new religion that's been imposed by the secularists. You say anything against that. And just last couple of weeks, you'll have seen in Scotland the furore against pro-life vigils outside hospitals. Now, they are people call them different things, but they are certainly a witness that some people want to be a witness that we are against the killing of unborn babies, that certainly want to do that. But our Parliament have done everything they possibly can to make sure that they are hidden from society. And as I said, everything abortion touches is corrupted. So our politicians will do anything to say, even to go against their deeply held views on the importance of freedom of speech for a democratic country. They're even willing to subvert that. So that will be closed down. So we had, I'll say a wee bit more about this later, but we have the Orwellian sounding new thing in Scotland, which is called the Safe Access Zone. So it's a safe access zone, so that's round about abortion facilities. If you go into that and you're against abortion, or you might be trying to influence or show your disagreement with abortion, you can get a £10,000 fine. So quite a staggering change. Now, how did we get here? And what should it have been? Now I want to read a quote from one of the leaflets. The White Rose movement only managed to get 4 leaflets out. They tried to produce these leaflets, trying to awaken the consciences of their fellow citizens. But in one of them they said, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the protection of individual citizens from the arbitrary will of criminal regimes of violence, these will be the basis of the new Europe. So they could see what Europe should have been if it was to fulfill the sort of Christian foundations of Europe and flourish, trying to find a society that was worthy of human beings. Those were the values that they expected to have. And very briefly we had that. We had, after the Nuremberg trials, remember the Nuremberg trials, people say that everything we did was legal, and it was. They passed all the laws to allow that, everything was legal. But in Nuremberg they said, well actually there's a higher law than that. There's a higher law that we must answer to, and we don't care. And the leaders of the Holocaust were hanged after Nuremberg or imprisoned, because the world said no, and then they created world systems to protect human rights. So that flourished for a while. But then it's the same pattern of what happened through the 20th century. The 20th century, you have these ideologies that grasp power at the top level, and they enforce their ideology on everyone else. So you had fascism, you had Nazism, you had communism. That is how they work. They do not trust the people. A healthy democracy is built from the bottom up, and a healthy democracy has people who grow up in a healthy society and they want to serve the people below them. Not say to the people below them, do you know what, you have the wrong ideas and we're going to change them for you. That is the pattern of the modern ideology we're facing in this country and across the Western world, if not the whole world. It's rolling out now to the point that there is a disdain for the values that once animated Europe. Some of you have heard me give other talks on this about the trajectory of culture. It does get to that. To the end of a civilization, you get to the point where everyone rebels against the values that made their society possible. They actually hate their own values. Why do we follow those silly values from the past? Let's destroy them. And that's what we're facing just now. So there are a small elite guiding that, but they have their placemen and their devotees spreading this out through the various, now sadly, through various human rights bodies across the world. So it means that in our society we have a tightening noose around political life, so that people of principle, I'll mention John Mason later, but John Mason's here, an MSP. David Campanale will speak to us later, a politician, but you will hear what it's like to be a politician of principle, someone who holds the values that all of our ancestors held, the values of civilization and the values of democracy. So we now have this tightening noose that will crush anyone who holds to those values, and we have massive conformity by those who are in power. And part of their vision is of unrestrained abortion. In 2015 we did some polling, and we found that 1% of the population supported abortion to birth. I thought it was bad enough. 1% think killing a baby right up to 40 weeks in the womb is okay. Within 5 years it moved up to something like 10%. So it's worrying how quickly that is spreading, that idea. Anyway, if you get involved with SPUC and some of the work we do, we can explain how that happens, but there are people working to make that so. It doesn't happen by accident. It's unnatural to think that when you see a full-term baby that you would actually be willing to have it killed. That's unnatural. But we have some notable members of Parliament, some politicians who are absolutely obsessed with that issue. So abortion to birth is what they're aiming for. And the way our political situation is just now, it would not be surprising if we got it. They got it in Canada. And the other thing you will hear about after me this morning will be from Canada, and you will hear that another part of the culture of death that they're determined to spread is assisted suicide and euthanasia. So again, the foundations of natural law start at a recognition of the good of life, and it's interesting now that at the end of our civilization, they're determined to crush that and say, well, actually, do you know what? Death is actually a good thing. Death is the better option here. So you hear more about that. So I wanted you to mention a couple of examples just to show you what we're up against. So the Stella Creasy and Diana Johnson are two MPs who are particularly committed to abortion to birth. So they've tried at every turn. They managed to get abortion into Northern Ireland, because what they do is when a bill comes forward, they keep adding amendments to these bills. So you find if you're on our side, we're a small organisation, small organisations fighting against us, you're trying to fight pieces of legislation all over the place, and they just keep tagging amendments to various bills, and the bill just comes through up in front of Parliament. There's massive conformity in politics, and the politicians just vote with it. So that's how we got abortion in Northern Ireland. SPUC have worked to keep abortion out of Northern Ireland for the last 50 years. And we had done it just till the last few years. So massive effort, but they just keep at it and they keep at it. Another, I mentioned that we funded the midwives case. Another case that SPUC funded was to challenge the idea of the abortion pill being used at home. So we took that to court. It costs a fortune to go to court, it really does. And folk phone me quite regularly and said, "Oh John, I've got a legal case for you to take. Could you take this legal case?" It costs a lot of money to do that. I would love to take loads of legal cases, but it's just so expensive. And we're up against the might of the state and the might of the UN and the might of the European Union. They just keep coming, one thing after another. So I'm saying that because it sets the context for some comments. So we said that if you have the abortion pill, you give the abortion pill to women at home, you're turning their homes into abortion clinics. That cannot be right. That cannot be the law. And sure enough, we did get the top lawyers you could get, and they looked at it and said, no, the law is quite clear. There's two criteria in the 1967 Abortion Act, and that is that an abortion has to take place under the supervision of a medical practitioner, and it has to take place in an approved medical facility. So when we got the lawyers, and they're like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. Those two, they don't satisfy either of those. But when you go to court, remember I said earlier, abortion corrupts everything. You get judges doing mental gymnastics to try and make a woman going on her own, or even now they've changed it during COVID so that she can get an envelope through the post box. She opens the envelope and there's abortion pills in that. She uses them herself, not under supervision, in her own home, not in an approved medical facility, and she has an abortion at home. What sort of rigour and control is that for abortion? This thing in 1967 they said would only happen in a very small number of cases. And now each year we've got 250,000, 250,000 of our future generation being killed every single year. Anyway, we said that is going to be a disaster. And they said, oh no, it's only going to just be for the first 10 weeks, first 12 weeks. So inevitably there was a case, and it was Carla Foster. She took those pills and she had the baby and at 34 weeks, and the baby died after taking her delivering after using the abortion pills. So it was a 30-week. She ended up being prosecuted, and that led to the pro-abortion movement seeing it as a great opportunity. How do we use this? Now, the actual reality at the time was they came out saying, this is terrible, this just shows you how bad the law is. The public reaction was really strong about, that's absolutely wicked, how could someone do such a thing? I don't know the details of Carla Foster's mental health or whatever, but you don't make someone's mental health a free-for-all for anyone to have an abortion whenever they feel like it. But anyway, there was a prosecution, and that led to Stella Creasy jumping on that and just saying this is an absolute outrage. So she went to social media and she said, this case reveals the bitter truth. Contrary to what some claim, abortion is not legal in England and you can be prosecuted for having one. No other healthcare procedure has such a status. No other patient group would be treated in this way. It's time to change the law and trust women. That's a regular thing they do. They plant words and they just keep repeating them. You know, trust women. That's another thing. Trust women. Trust women. Keep doing that. Another thing they keep going on about is abortion is healthcare. I'll say a bit about that in a wee second. But I want to quote another important person who was head of BPAS, British Pregnancy Advisory Service, for almost 20 years, and that is Anne Ferretti. She has done a remarkable job in just pushing every boundary possible for abortion. She's determined to have abortion at any time whatsoever. So she was outraged on the Carla Foster, but in the past she has said, this sums up her consistent ethic. The only person capable of deciding whether she is able to continue with her pregnancy is the woman herself. She should be trusted to make that decision at any stage of her pregnancy. So in relation to the Carla Foster case, she came out and she said, I can find her comment. Sorry, I can't quite find it. But she said in relation to that it doesn't matter about the, sorry, I've just found it. It doesn't matter about the fetal viability. So right up to birth, even if you could deliver the baby and hand it over for adoption or do anything else, even then it doesn't matter. And the other thing she said doesn't matter is public opinion. Doesn't matter about public opinion. So they're absolutely determined to have this abortion free for all. Now, I met up with a sort of pro-life friend who had managed to get along to an abortion conference. There was 500 delegates at it, and Anne Ferretti was one of them there. So she said she's still at it, even though she's left BPAS now. She's still there, working with all these people, and they have a vision of how they will get abortion out across the whole world, expand it as much as possible. But one of the things that this friend was telling me at the conference, they were so proud of themselves because they were talking about how successful they had been in framing abortion, And so this is a thing, if you're in marketing, you talk about framing issues, but anyway, they are all proud because they said they have framed abortion using the phrase, abortion is healthcare. So that's why you hear it ad nauseum. So when you had the politicians talking about buffer zones as well as that, you know, they keep talking about, you know, no woman should be denied or to get access to her healthcare. So abortion is healthcare. They keep repeating that ad nauseum till it just, and the BBC and the news channels will happily repeat it. So we're facing modern day pharaohs who are experts in the manipulation of language, and they know. I'm sure at the time of Pharaoh, it would have been marketed quite well. It always amazes me that, especially good people, they sort of think that people who are going to do bad are going to come and say, listen, I'm going to do something really wicked, but I hope you let me do it. They don't. They come and say, I'm coming to do something really kind and really nice and really sensitive and caring and tolerant. They come and they say that. So that's what we've got to realise. We're facing those people like that. They are a minority who are determined to frame the issue and impose it using the media on the rest of us. So I could go on. I could go on with that. You know, there's just a few of them, but they're so determined, and the people in the middle just go along with it. That's the sad reality. So what I want to say to you, I thought, was after the war, you know, it must have been like in the 1970s, they must have looked back in Germany. So I think I did learn in Germany, apparently they're still in school. That is the big thing. They've all to repent about what happened in Germany 70 years ago. So all the kids in history at school, they have to go over and over and over it again. But imagine 20 years after it, and they were doing that. What did you do? See, when they were taking all those Jews into these camps, what did you do? And let's think in 20 years' time, say in 20 years' time, they look back and they say, were we killing 250,000 unborn lives every year? What did you do? And that's something I ask myself. What are they going to say? What did you do? And I've got to think, I need to do the right thing. Now, Mary Deighan was inspired by the witness of two humble midwives over 3,000 years ago. So if them doing what they knew was the right thing for them 3,000 years ago, how will our witness today echo through history? What are we going to do today to echo through history so people say, do you know what, those people did the right thing? And you are of course doing it. You've come to a SPUC conference, you know, you've done more than the vast majority of people, but picture that, and you know, today we need to do the same. We need to be the witnesses. So maybe in 3,000 years' time, we do not know the ups and downs of history, but we know that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it tends to justice, and we are working for justice. It will depend on what we are doing, whether we're successful or not. Sophie Scholl said, how can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give themselves up individually to a righteous cause? For those in this room today, this is the righteous. Somehow we know abortion is the moral issue of our age. And we may not feel that we're heroes. We may think, well, what can I do? I've just got a small position. Each of us will find some small way, and one of the things we're doing at SPUC is trying to show you small ways in which you can contribute to fighting it against this culture of death which is trying to expand. We need to be the sort of shifras and poors of our days against this, the pharaohs of our time who will happily sentence children to death. In the very first leaflet from the White Rose movement, they said this: every individual conscious of his responsibility as a member of Christian and Western civilization must defend himself against the scourges of mankind, against fascism and any similar system of totalitarianism. We are facing a form of totalitarianism. If you cannot have freedom of speech in a democracy, if you cannot tell people what you believe, if you're not allowed to be open, and with a politician banned from his party today for speaking out what he thought was the truth, for actually going along to the hospital to see what these pro-life vigils, to actually go and see what that looks like, and seeing it candidly, what he'd discovered. If you cannot have that, you're under a totalitarian system. So the White Rose movement went on and he said, offer passive resistance. Resistance wherever you may be. Forestall the spread of this atheistic war machine before it is too late. So it's not too late for us. We have we're up against it, but it's a small number of people who are moving the masses, and we need to displace them, and we need to move them back. People's consciences still can tell truth from falsehood, can still tell good from bad. I just want to finish encouraging you that have a look at our website, there's leaflets there, have a look at the sort of things that we do. There are really easy things to do. Some of you might have to put your head above the parapet and suffer the consequences, or you might have to think, I don't care if I lose my job, I'm not getting blood in my hands to end a human life. Do what you can do. In the face of another tyranny, Winston Churchill said these words: the malice of the wicked was reinforced by the weakness of the virtuous. So what I would say, friends, is let us not allow the malice of our age to continue its reign. Let us do what we can to stop it. Thank you.